Hello, YouTube. I'm Vince White. I'm an employment attorney, and we are answering questions that were publicly posted for YouTube users. This question was posted 2 weeks ago by YouTube user Jay Hefner, who has been asking up a storm, and we owe some answers. And this question was asked on our August 24th of 2022 video entitled, "I'm not sure I can trust my employment attorney. Should I share my evidence with she or he?" Okay, so here's the question. I'll read the question in the record, and then we'll do our best to answer. Jay Hefner asks, if filing a lawsuit against a government and state-connected entity in a civil case for racial discrimination and retaliation, how would one get out-of-town counsel that is not politically tied to the organization? It appears that lawyers in the state are intimidated or taking deals to pause depositions against this entity. Could the strategy of teaming with an out-of-state attorney help out the process? All right, this is one of the reasons why firms like ours exist. There's not too many of them, by which I mean national firms that represent claimants under the federal laws in the EEOC in all 50 states, right? And potentially in federal court with local counsel, depending. Now, there's a couple of those firms right off the top of my head. I really can only tell you about two. Gloria Allred has quite a network. She's, of course, a very famous California-based employment attorney, very skilled with the press. Can't speak to the local counsel network she has. I don't have personal knowledge of the quality of those attorneys, but that's a firm that I think represents people all over the country. Ours does. There might be one or two more, although it's very unclear. A lot of this information comes from LexisNexis, which does studies on this effect, on the data here, like how many cases firms are handling and who's in all 50 states and stuff like that. So those kinds of firms are the options, right? And those kinds of firms tend to exist because in many states they're not good options for plaintiff side employment attorneys. And I'm not saying all the firms are bad in some of these states. I'm just saying that it's often the case that the plaintiffs, the victims in that particular state, look at their local attorneys and say, no, thank you. And that could be because of what you're dealing with here, that they're just not, they seem to have a conflict of interest that you perceive of some kind, or they're not being aggressive enough, or there just could be no specialized attorneys, right? There could be nobody who handles specifically only plaintiff side employment law in your state. There's many states where that is the case. So often what people will do in your situation where they're just not really trusting local attorneys for whatever reason is they will reach out to national firms. Now, as a national firm, I'll be frank with you, the first thing out of my mouth is always going to be, you should talk to local counsel. And I hear you don't want to, but I'm going to say it anyways, because local counsel will always be much cheaper than hiring our firm, just because local counsel's not flying attorneys around the country. And I am, and that's expensive because attorneys don't like to fly coach. At least not my attorneys, right? If you're putting really good people in the field, they're going to have a number of demands, and they're going to certain levels of hotel, certain levels of quality of flight, right? Some of the meal bills that come in that get expensed, let me tell you, there's something. And we're not really passing those costs onto the client. We cover the expenses, but we do have a fee structure that is expensive in general because we need to make money if we're going to take a case, right? So knowing that it's much more expensive for us to fly attorneys around the country and represent a given case in a given state, we have to be using a fee structure that is generally going to be a little bit pricier than the local options. So I'll always tell people, and it bothers people, it jars people. They're like, what, you don't want to help me? I'm like, no, but I do want you to get the best deal. So talk to your local options, see if they're good, right? There's people in the middle of nowhere who are the sickest employment attorneys, right? I've run into these people and I've just been like, whenever I get a call from that area, I'm like, yeah, so here's the thing. Probably don't hire me. You do have a really good option locally that is going to be way more affordable. I get it. In many situations, people say, no. I've looked into the local options. It's not what I want. I need somebody out of state who's not connected, or just out of state because I need somebody who just does employment law, who has a depth of experience in this field. And that's when a firm like Gloria's, and I'm not on first names with Gloria Allred, so I shouldn't be calling her Gloria, Miss Allred, Attorney Allred, right? A firm like hers or a firm like mine, that's when you'd reach out to a firm like that, or some of the other national firms that are out there. I will say there's a couple of personal injury firms that seem to kind of sort of take employment cases. And there's a couple of case aggregation firms. If you're familiar with these, it's like firms that don't actually practice anymore, but have like really good media presence and run a lot of ads and have like TV commercials and stuff. And they get cases that way and they just place them in local counsel. I would steer clear of those, because what you're really doing is you're hiring that firm and they're just zipping your case right back to a local counsel that they're going to split fees with. So you haven't actually gotten away from local counsel when you're dealing with one of those firms. And the PI firms, I don't know. I get nervous when somebody's doing something besides employment law. I think employment law is kind of a hyper specialized field. We can't say that we're experts in a given field, I think, under the ethical guidelines of some states. So I'm not going to say that, but I do think generally what I would say is you want someone to only practice employment law, because if someone's working every hour of every day on employment law, they're going to understand more than someone who wakes up, works 20 PI cases, and then turns to their employment book of business, right? That to me is non-ideal. Some of those firms might do amazing. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying, if you're asking me what kind of firm to go with, I would say, okay, if you really want a national firm, make sure it's one of the national employment firms for plaintiffs, okay? Not somebody who's just aggregating cases and then zipping them back to local counsel, or somebody who is just taking whatever they can get, like a big net, and they're gonna push all the cases, whether it's personal injury or med mal or employment, right? That to me would be non-ideal as well. Anyways, Jay Hefner, I hope this answers your question. When you ask, could the strategy of teaming with an out-of-state attorney help the process? Potentially, although your current attorney would not be happy about that, right? There's a good chance your current attorney would be like, no, I'm not going to split fees with some out-of-towners. They don't know their assholes from their elbows, right? Pardon my language. And that's because that local attorney is not going to be interested in losing the case to outside counsel or splitting fees with outside counsel. Now, if your case is in federal court, incoming counsel from out of state is going to need boots on the ground. They have to hire someone local to work with, to co-counsel with. But there's a good chance your current attorney might not be amenable to that, unless she or he feels a little overwhelmed by the employment case and is like, yes, it would be amazing if we get somebody who really knows these federal laws in here. That would be great. That happens. It's just rare. So, again, I hope this answers your questions. If it doesn't, I will track this video. You know me. If you comment down below, I'll try to get you an answer. Like and subscribe. Helps me to help more people just like you. Take care.